Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. This is your host, Jess Root, and I'm here today, whenever you're listening, with Seth Cox, as we always do after an Arizona Cardinals game. And we have some good news, as you have been following the Cardinals. Week 2 meant victory. The Arizona Cardinals came away with a 25-14 victory on the road on the East Coast over the New York Giants, doing so without starting quarterback Carson Palmer, as he sat out with a shoulder injury. Drew Stanton led the way, and they got the win. They're now 2-0, and it wasn't the prettiest of wins. However, they got the job done. And we have a couple other new bits of information that just came through as we are recording this on a Tuesday evening. This will be up on the site. When you're listening to it, will be probably Wednesday or a day or two after that. But Revenge of the Birds Radio is brought to you by Audible.com, the internet's leading audio content provider on the web. Get podcasts, you can get audiobooks, all sorts of audio content for the internet. And Revenge of the Birds Radio listeners, you guys have the opportunity. There's a special deal for you, as I have been telling you about for weeks. Go to audible.com and test out the service. And you do so by going to audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. You can test out the service for a month, absolutely free. And on top of that, you can get yourself a free audiobook download. I told you that I downloaded several audiobooks, and the first one I finished a while back. I told you about the book that I downloaded and our trip over a weekend when we went up to visit some family. It was wonderful. Turned on the audiobook, kids listened, nobody fought, and it was beautiful. So go ahead and do that. Audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds and get yourself your free audiobook download. And so we've got Arizona Cardinals football to talk about. We've got a couple of a couple of moves that happened, a couple of roster moves, speculation, things like that. But first, let's bring Seth on the line and have him welcome himself to you. Seth, how are you doing?
Good, Jess. How are you?
Doing great. Ned, we've had a couple of things come through the pipeline down the pike now for Tuesday news, and that is that the Arizona Cardinals made a couple of roster moves, as John Abraham has informed the team that he is returning, and so the Cardinals, they made room for him. They released Marcus Bernard, and they also released punter Drew Butler, who had punted the last 2 games, in place of Dave Zastudil. It appears that Dave Zastudil is healthy, as they let that other punter go. So Butler is gone. Marcus Bernard is gone. And that leaves room for John Abraham, and then they made a signing of linebacker Victor Butler. Hoping to find something to boost the pass rush, which has been anemic thus far in the season. Bruce Arians was on Sirius XM Radio NFL Tuesday evening, as he tends to be with Alex Marvez. I believe he does that every week. A couple of things that came out of that. One is that John Abraham still has not passed the concussion protocol. He will go through it again on Wednesday. Hopefully he will be able to pass, but he can't obviously practice or play until he passes that protocol. So even though he has decided to return to the team, there is no sure thing that he will be able to play this weekend against the San Francisco 49ers. The second thing was Arians described sort of what happened with Carson Palmer's injury. He said that they didn't actually know right up until right before the game. Said they weren't sure because it's a bruised nerve. It's a nerve injury. It's just kind of not waking up. It's not doing anything. And he said it could be one day, it could be a month before Palmer's good. They're getting treatment. They're doing all they can. But the truth is they don't know. And in fact, he said to Drew Stanton, "Hey, you're up. If we win the toss, we're getting the ball first." And he was a professional about it. Drew Stanton did an okay job. at the quarterback position. But tell us, Seth, what does that? I mean, just based on that, since that's new for today, do you know anything about Victor Butler? All I know is what the team sent. I haven't read anything about it. I don't recall him being particularly effective or much when he was on the Cowboys. And in terms of pass rushing production, I mean, in 63 career games, he's got 11 sacks. What do you know anything about Butler?
Yeah, he was a guy that in 2013 was signed by the Saints. He was kind of the I want to say he was one of the Pro Football Focus kind of hidden gem guys because of his ability to get to the passer in his limited playing time. In 2010, I just want to make sure I have my numbers right. Yeah, 2010 with the Cowboys, he only played in 15% of the snaps. 2011, he moved up to like 25. I'm trying to find the tweet I sent out earlier. And then in 2012, he was up to, I want to say, 30% of the snaps. His 15% of the snaps in 2010, 23% of the snaps in 2011, and 30% in 2012. The big thing is those 11 sacks came in only 691 snaps, and if people might say only 691 snaps, well, to put that into perspective, last year, John Abraham had 11 and a half, I believe he finished with on the season,
Yes.
sacks, and he did that in 884 snaps. Now,
Okay.
obviously, it's a little different when you're talking about 3 years versus 1 year. But as far as productivity goes, he's one of those guys that flashed a lot and then got picked up and was going to be given a chance in Rob Ryan's defense in New Orleans, and he banged knees with Mark Ingram in, I want to say, July of 2013, and in training camp, and he tore his ACL, went on the IR for the year, and didn't play at all in 2013. And from what I can see, he did not take any snaps in the preseason in 2014 either. So I'm not sure what's going on. That's a pretty lengthy recovery from an ACL surgery, or I just don't know if another team wanted to give him a chance during the preseason or what's going on. But that was the story on Butler. He's a guy that everybody was waiting to see what was next for him when he got a chance to, kind of take those full allotment of snaps and get in a lot of plays, and just a fluke injury in training camp happened, and now he's trying to make it back and recover.
And that's really kind of interesting. That's better perspective on the at least the sack production, the pass rushing production in terms of playing time. That is interesting though, that he's missed so much time considering the recovery of Tyrann Mathieu, who had his first game action this past Sunday, and we're looking at 9 months from the original injury, and his wasn't just an ACL, it was a gruesome knee injury. And the same thing with Alameda Teamu, who has played in both of the first 2 games for the Cardinals. He's played limited, but he is coming off an ACL surgery. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, the team gave him a physical, feels that his body is structurally okay for everything. It'll be interesting to see what type of contribution they expect from him. If it'll be a this week, if he'll get any playing time. Well, even if I would imagine he would probably be the odd man out if John Abraham is active, if he plays. But if John Abraham isn't able to go, will he see playing time, especially after, in terms of Sunday's game, really kind of a nothing performance in terms of pass rushing from Thomas Kaiser and Sam Ocho. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's what the interesting thing is. It's, you kind of hit it on the head. The idea of another kind of body just to see what they can do. Like you said, Kaiser really showed well in his, I think, 14 snaps in Game 1 against San Diego, and then did a whole lot of nothing, as you said, in
For his
Game 2.
50 snaps in Game 2.
Yeah, 50 snaps. And I kind of joked about that on Twitter, but it is true. You know, going from a guy that gets just to pin his ears back and go after the quarterback to being a guy that's expected to play every down, that's a huge change in what you're expected to do and responsibility. So it makes things really difficult. And I think that kind of exposed, and you don't want to say exposed, but kind of exposed Kaiser in Game 1 or Game 2.
Well, and I'll be honest that I didn't know what to expect. There were people who were very high on Kaiser for some of the production that he had, but a guy I know who's at least in the odds business, he's not necessarily in the football analysis, but he's on the odds side of things and setting football lines. And my comment to him is my comment to him about how Thomas Kaiser would play, and he said that's rather unfortunate because he's terrible. So
Jeez, that's kind of rough.
it was very blunt, but granted, this isn't a football guy. This is an odds guy, which has a little bit to do with football, but he was not positive. There was nothing optimistic in terms of what we could expect from Kaiser, because he says, oh, that's unfortunate because he's terrible. So we'll see how that goes over the next couple of weeks. Which brings us, how badly do the Cardinals, and this is really they're all kind of, the reports are all over the place. Well, the one thing we do know, John Abraham suffered a concussion in the second half of week 1 against San Diego. He left the game. He then contemplated leaving the game. Then there were reports of, especially with the offseason that he had, he didn't participate in off-season workouts. He was arrested for DUI in Georgia. He entered a rehab facility. And kind of the story goes is that alcohol has kind of been a demon of Abraham's for a long time. And he's kind of had it under control. Bobby McManaman for the Republic had a very good interview with him. Said it was actually very tough to break the news, because he broke the news about his DUI in Georgia, because Abraham opened up to him and talked about the demons of alcohol. So obviously there's been some tough things going on in his life, as apparently alcohol became a problem again for him, reportedly. ESPN reported that he's been suffering severe memory loss for the last year. Although Bruce Arians said that the thing that I got a kick out of, I feel, is Adam Schefter's report of the concussion, saying that John Abraham, who's suffering another concussion, based on what we heard from Bruce Arians, this is Abraham's first concussion in his career, which kind of leads, at his age, getting a head injury like that really would kind of throw him for a loop, because it seems like he's had the headaches that it really caused him to rethink things. Obviously, physically, the team feels like he's okay, at least in terms of returning, and he's decided to come back. But how important, and it's really kind of a tough situation, because the Cardinals lost a lot of production when Abraham left in terms of pass rushing production. He didn't have even a pressure in that first game. How badly do the Cardinals need him? And that's really kind of an interesting scenario to put him in, considering he was considering leaving the game. But how crucial is Abraham to this defense?
Well, you look at Kaepernick, and we'll just go with Game 1, because obviously that's kind of the question right now, is will Abraham playing this week, with a concussion protocol and everything. So you look at game, what Kaepernick does. Under pressure, his quarterback rating in 13 was 62.5, which is obviously not good. But the crazy thing is, and this is where Abraham comes in, his numbers when he was blitzed under pressure was like, he had like almost a 100 quarterback rating. So you have to get pressure on Kaepernick, but you can't do it from the blitz. You have to be able to go with your four-man rush and create pressure, and kind of a contained pressure, as opposed to opening up those lanes and alleys for him to run and expose it with his legs, and that's kind of the only person on the team outside of Calais Campbell that can do that, and especially from an outside position is John Abraham. So I think his presence is really important, but obviously in terms of just health, overall health, it's game one of the NFC West, and only game three of the season. Yeah, it would be great to kind of get that extra 2-game lead, so to speak, on the 49ers in the division, but it's not absolutely necessary that they have him, but it is absolutely necessary that they create pressure without having to blitz.
And that's kind of the interesting thing. And obviously, I think that the biggest thing you can tell from just the eye test, granted, I believe that Abraham still is a little bit rusty, a little bit not quite where he should be, and he started slowly last year. Well, I'll admit he was a slow starter last year. He didn't get his first sack until week 7, and then they came in bunches. But he didn't have a single sack for the first 7 weeks of the season, for the first 6 games of the season, that is. And so, but he does have some pressure. So when he got hurt against San Diego and left the game, you could just see right there the defense looked different. It wasn't as good. It was during those next 2 drives that the Cardinals had to regroup, and really Phillip Rivers and the Chargers really sort of moved up and down the field. They made adjustments and were able to stop things, but against New York, obviously the pass rush, I mean, yes, they got a sack from Rashad Johnson, and then they had a sack fumble called back. And then the very last series, in that desperation drive, Calais Campbell finally logged a sack that counted. But it seems like a bunch of schemed patchwork done by Todd Bowles to kind of cover that up. And even just the presence of John Abraham, even if he's not getting sacks, does something different to the defense, especially because he played really strongly. Arians praised him multiple times last year. He played really well against the run as well.
Yeah, and you kind of just look at what the Cardinals need to do this week and what they have done and have not done well, and so far they really haven't been able to create pressure from the edge. You kind of look at what they've done. You've got 2 sacks on the season. You've got only a handful of those pressures that you and I have talked about before. That they're important, but it's not the be all end all. So you just want to look at what they're doing, and what they're doing is they're on pace for 16 sacks in a season, which is really really bad. So that's just kind of got to be the focus right now. I know, like you and I have talked about every week, I know the hip thing right now is to ignore sacks and focus on pressures, but with a guy like Colin Kaepernick, you have to finish, and you have to be able to put him down in the backfield, or else he is just going to eat you alive. And I think that's really where it starts right now for the Cardinals. They're ranked. Hold on, I'm trying to pull it back up. I know they're not last because I know a couple teams don't have any sacks yet, but yeah, they're tied for third to last in the league. Fourth to last in the league with only 2 sacks on the season. There's some teams down here that you wouldn't expect. The Ravens and even the Saints only have 2 sacks so far on the season, but I think in the division they play in, with Kaepernick and Wilson, you want to see those numbers start to trend upwards.
Oh, and last year it was insane. I just pulled up the numbers. The way they went against Kaepernick last year, they blitzed Kaepernick on 30 of 32 dropbacks. that was in the first game. Let me pull up the week 17, and Well, and they blitzed him on 26 of 38 in that Week 17 game. So they really relied on the blitz, and the truth is Kaepernick really tore them apart, to say
Well,
the least, when they did that.
Well, and that's what's interesting about Kaepernick, and I think that I know a lot of Cardinals fans don't like him, and I understand why. He's an opposing quarterback, but you look at what he does, and where he succeeds is against pressure, where he can move and get on the move. It's containing him that where he can struggle, and I think that kind of needs to be the Cardinals' plan, is to have a guy that can get pressure opposite Calais Campbell and cause Kaepernick to have to stay in the pocket and make throws from the pocket, but in a hurry, and that's kind of what you have to do with Kaepernick. So that'll be important this week, and like you said, they probably, I wouldn't say they played him well in those two games last year, since he put up some really impressive numbers. Maybe not completion percentage wise. I know that's a big thing right now, but he did enough to win two games for his team. So that's kind of how you have to look at it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the last game, the win. Obviously, the biggest thing that came out of that was Drew Stanton. He got in the game. He first two drives down the field, picked up 10 points, got a touchdown on the very first drive, field goal on the next drive, and then after that wasn't particularly. I mean, his numbers at the end of the game weren't great. He completed 11 of 29 for 100 and some odd, 170, 160 some odd yards. By no means is that great, but what he did do, he did not turn the ball over. He did take some sacks, and the question I have is, what takeaways did you get from Drew Stanton? I was and this is since the preseason, I've kind of been hitting it hard that Drew Stanton is kind of like a Kevin Kolb. He reminds me a lot of a Kevin Kolb. Now, does that mean? And just to clarify, I didn't think Kevin Kolb was a terrible quarterback. When they traded for him, I was very high on Kolb. I believed in what Kevin Kolb could do, that he had some upside to be a very good quarterback. What I see in Drew Stanton is a lot of what we saw from Kevin Kolb, a guy who is tough. He probably he's got a better arm than Kolb, but the way he moves around is a little bit mobile. He holds the ball too long. The way he moves reminds me of Kolb. And he seems to be very much a guy that has to be in rhythm. He didn't do anything stupid, which was good. But he did, I think, the 5 sacks he had, you could really pin 4 of them on Stanton for not getting rid of the ball, especially since we were used to, over the last year plus, of Carson Palmer, who's really good at getting rid of that ball quickly, knowing where pressure's coming. He's not mobile, but he knows how to get rid of the ball. And Stanton, whether it was just rust, because he hadn't played in a regular season game since 2010, I looked at him and said, look, it's Kevin Kolb, which by no means is a bad thing for me. Tell me, what were your takeaways from what you saw from Stanton, which is the first real evaluation we can make of him since he joined the team?
So, going back through my chart of what he did, you had 29 passing attempts, 14 completions. Obviously, we know those numbers. I had basically an even split of you had 14 passes of less than 10 yards and 15 passes over 10 yards. That was basically the split, and he completed 7 or I had him at 8 passes completed under 10 yards and 6 completed over 10 yards. That includes he hit 2 passes for over 20 yards. So basically he was, as bad short as he was long. So you kind of look at it, and it wasn't necessarily the plays that Coach Arians was calling, something that we had talked about last year with Carson Palmer early when he was struggling to get the ball down the field and push the ball downfield. So then you go to kind of the next thing, and you look at his numbers, and under pressure he was just really not good, and that's kind of where it just sticks. You look at it, he was pressured on 12 of his 20 or 33 dropbacks, excuse me. And so basically almost every other drop back he was going to get a pressure on, and that kind of coincides with what we talked about: holding the ball too long, not getting the ball out quick enough, but also probably not being super comfortable with what he was asked to do. Just like you said, 4 years is a long time to not have thrown a pass in the NFL, so it's just a difficult situation. His struggles really just kind of sat at when he was under pressure. He only completed 3 of the 12 passes. Obviously, he was sacked the 4 times. I gave him 3 sacks. So
one was a terrible. I know the one by Larson was just brutal.
Yeah, that was the only sack I gave to the offensive line. That's on how I grade it. Obviously, that's I'm going through Pro Football Focus now, and they gave 2 sacks to the offensive, one to John Carlson, and obviously the bad one to Larson, and then only 1 to Stanton. So, it's graded as you see it. I didn't see it where a couple of those were on the offensive line. I thought they were on Stanton, so that's just how I graded it. But it's just one of those things. It's a combination of everything that we've said. He was rusty. He was kind of lethargic in his reads and his decision making, and I think you kind of pointed it out. I truly believe that part of the reason he, struggled so much was because he was focused, and his sole focus was to not throw one of those Carson Palmer interceptions that we talk about a lot, that where he's going to try to make a play that he probably shouldn't try to make, and that ends up costing them field position, or worse, a pick six, something where the Giants could have gone down and get points. And so for that, you look at what he did, and you have to be happy. It was, as you called it, a very Kevin Kolb-esque game. It really looked like Kolb at the beginning of 2012, where they won those first 4 games, where he just did enough to keep the defense in games and let the defense make plays, and then made 1 or 2 offensive plays as the game went along. So
and that is exactly, and even 2011, it reminded me of that, because if you look at the game, and I had a tweet about that. You think you had a quarterback that wasn't. I mean, the offense really didn't do much in 2011. It didn't do. There were ups and downs by a whole bunch. So the offense didn't do great. The defense wasn't dominating, and they had key special teams plays. They got the big return, and it's like, we're like living in 2011 again. But at the same time, and then this is the question I'm going to ask, since this might come up, do you believe that Drew Stanton has enough? Was there enough optimism there that assuming Carson Palmer couldn't miss as much as a month or 2, can the Cardinals win this season, or even beyond this season, with Drew Stanton as their starting quarterback?
I think it gives you a couple. It gives you a couple things to look at. One, you're happy that the offense was. more run focused. That was good to see. Ball control, time, kind of cut time down. Um, Obviously, they have to be able to do more in the passing game. The 167 yards passing. If you're going to have 167 yards passing, then you better have 200 yards rushing. It has to be something into that nature, because you can't average 300 yards of offense in a game and expect to win a lot of games. So I think you want to see a little bit more from, in terms of completions, especially in that 0 to 10 range, where he was not really good. He completed only 5, yeah. So he only completed 5 passes from 0 to 10 yards. So that's not good. That's where you want to see him pick it up. But also, it's one game after 4 years of not really playing. And so, everybody's going to say, oh, preseason, he's played in the preseason, but he really
Totally
hasn't.
not the same thing.
Yeah.
Especially when he was playing against twos. He was playing against twos.
Yeah, at every stop as well. So, yeah, he hasn't done anything in that many years. So, you take it for what it was. He has not done anything that makes you say, okay, we're fine without Carson Palmer. But he also hasn't done anything that makes you want to say, all right, I think we may need to see what Logan Thomas has. So I think in terms of both of those things, you're happy.
And I'm the same way. I look at it optimistically. From what I saw from Drew Stanton, since it reminded me of a Kevin Cobb type performance, who's a Kevin Cobb who's not going to just break. In fairness, that's one of the saddest things that we've seen over the past couple of years. I believe they can win with Drew Stanton, but it's not the way they want to win. They have to play. They almost have to play flawlessly. The way they were winning games, they have to win gritty, win dirty, and they have to get big plays from special teams. The way they won games in 2011 and 2012, to show that they can, they certainly could win, and it was enough for me to say Drew Stanton could be a starting quarterback. Some of the ineffective, the missed passes, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due. And give blame where blame is due. There were some drops that the Cardinals had. Andre Ellington dropped a pass. Robert Hughes dropped a pass. Michael Floyd didn't turn around quick enough. Otherwise, that probably would have been a touchdown on that second drive, because Stanton put the ball right where it should have been. And then those numbers would be, if you just do those three. Then instead, that's 14 to 29 and maybe a touchdown. Still not fantastic, but still better. Obviously, dropped passes happen, as we've seen. The Cardinals have benefited from dropped passes on both of their opponents. The Chargers dropped a few. We saw the Giants drop a few. But at the same time, I see Stanton it's optimistic. Definitely, he's not Carson Palmer. I'm not going to be getting there was a Twitter kind of a conversation going on after the game that really Carson Palmer and Drew Stanton is a wash. There's make no mistake, Carson Palmer can do things that Drew Stanton can't. Carson Palmer is markedly better than Drew Stanton. I've seen it in practice. There is a drop-off. There is a huge drop-off. But Drew Stanton is the type of quarterback who can win you games. He's not going to win you games, but he can lead a team much like an Alex Smith can, who can be the quarterback of a winning team if there's the right talent around him, which they do have.
And that's kind of what it is. You have to just look at it as, okay, what do they do well, and what can he do well? And what he does well is he can throw the ball down the field. At this point in his career, I think he has a better arm than Carson Palmer, a stronger arm. But like you said, he doesn't make decisions as quickly as Palmer does. That's one of the things that you can't discount about guys like Warner and Palmer as they start to regress in terms of the physical ability. They still see windows that guys don't see before they're open or closed, and make those throws. Whereas Stanton sees the window, maybe a second later, and it takes all he has to get the ball to fit in there, and then all of a sudden it's a odd looking pass, and that's kind of what you look at with Stanton is, what, he is not a terrible quarterback by any means. Like you said, he's a quarterback that he can likely, he can likely lead this team to the point where they may, be able to withstand a 1 month, Palmer sabbatical, so to speak. So I think that would be okay. But you want to see a little bit more in terms of, in terms of gameplay before you make any judgments overall. And that's just for me.
Yeah, definitely, and which makes it interesting. Carson Palmer's contract does expire at the end of the season. We would assume that they want to re-sign him, and it would make sense to re-sign him. It may cost a little more, but say they don't, and you get Logan Thomas probably not ready next year, if he's ever ready at all. I mean, there's definitely question to that development. Stanton Stanton, I think, could do it, but it would look a lot like 2011, 2012 when they were winning games. Not the disaster, not the dumpster fire of 2012, but the beginning when those games were really tough wins, cardiac Cardinals type wins where you're getting just enough from the quarterback position, and we've seen teams do that before. I mean, if you think of some of the winning quarterbacks, Kevin Kolb could have been behind a better line, could have been better. Matt Hasselbeck, there was a time when he was pretty good, but no one ever saw him as. I mean, Matt Hasselbeck is kind of the best case scenario of something like Drew Stanton. And Hasselbeck wasn't a fantastic quarterback. He did just enough and put up some pretty good numbers, but you never really felt that he was ever one of the elite quarterbacks. He was a pretty good quarterback in a good system that he knew, and he was smart, which is kind of what you want to have until you find your guy.
Yeah, and that's exactly, that's exactly what you're looking for at this point. You want to see him just continue to blossom and continue to play well and continue to give your team a chance to win at the end of the day, and that's what he's done, like you said, so far. And so I think you're excited / happy with that. And I think if he is forced to play on Sunday, we're going to know a whole lot more, and I think that's where we'll start to decide if, okay, this guy's going to be okay, or okay, get well much sooner, Carson, because this can't go for too long. I don't think it's going to be a happy medium. I think you're either going to be like, okay, this will be okay for however long it needs to be okay for, or you're going to beg to see Palmer back.
And let's move on to a little more things other than Stanton. But let's look at offensive and defensive takeaways from that game. I'm going to look at the offensive side of the ball. It was exciting to see how Andre Ellington played. So he's still not 100% by any means, as he missed 2 days of practice, was limited in the last day. It seems like that's going to be the story for most of this year, is he's going to be banged up, his foot's going to be sore. What do we get out of him? We got over 100 yards of offense from him. He got the 92 yards, 91 yards rushing, and another 10 in the passing game, and had looked good. I mean, that's the sort of thing. If he can do that the rest of the way out, that's exactly what we're wanting to see, what we hope to see. But you can get 1,500 yards of total offense out of him, of total yards from him over the course of the year, and he was good. And that was good to see. We had the burst from Jonathan Dwyer on that 20-yard run. Unfortunately, yeah, after that he wasn't much. And offensively, after that there wasn't much to take away other than what was a potentially, now granted we didn't see that in week one, an offense that could really move the ball down the field was really hit and miss. And you can see the difference in the quarterbacks is how much better the offensive line looks with Carson Palmer there as opposed to Drew Stanton, because they did not have to, because we saw that there were issues. We saw Ted Larson get beat up a bit in that game, and while Larson with Palmer back there looked like a serviceable guy. That's what I took away offensively. It was good to see Ellington, and especially the Cardinals have to get production from their running game against San Francisco like they did, and actually both of those games for really to have any chance at all of winning these games.
Yeah, and Ellington played extremely well. I think that was kind of the prototype game you want to see out of him. As you said, it really just kind of sets him up. Yards from scrimmage on the season, he's at 181, which is just under 100 yards a game. So, like you said, that's right on pace for that 1,500 yard from scrimmage season. I'm actually kind of surprised how little he's caught the ball, but that may have more to do with the foot than actual kind of trying to get him the ball. But as far as running the ball, he's doing a good job. Dwyer, he had the nice run like you talked about, but you take away that 20-yard run, and he's got 15 rushes for 31 yards on the season. He's
Rashard Mendenhall.
Yeah, exactly. He's basically Rashard Mendenhall. That's who he is. I think when you look at the receiving, that's kind of where the interesting thing is at this point. We had all the hoopla about Fitz not getting targets and blah 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 in game one, and after game two he leads the team in catches, but he's second in yards, and they still only Andre Ellington or John Brown and Stephon Taylor are the only ones with receiving touchdowns, and you can see that Fitz is getting into that Hines Ward stage of his career where he's just going to catch the ball and there's not going to be much after the catch. 10 yards per reception. That's very, I guess,
pedestrian.
Possession receiver-ish at this point. But I think you and I talked about this, and you don't want to go too far right now, but I think when you look at Michael Floyd in game two, that's your concern going forward, is that, okay, you're supposed to be the big ticket receiver. You're the guy that's going to make the transition from Fitz really easy, and you go for one catch for 19 yards after going for 5 catches for 119 yards in the first game.
And that's what happened in 2013 too. He had what, a half a dozen 90-plus yard games and a half dozen 30 yards or less games.
Yeah, and so that's and like I said, it's the first game with the backup quarterback, so you're not going to read too much into it. But I think if after San Francisco, if he has another 2 catches with, or even 3 catches and under 50 yards, that's when you start to say, okay, as good or great as he can be at times, you need to see it more consistently before you start to anoint him as the guy going forward. But you look at what they did. It's so hard to break down the receivers in this game, just because, and it's nothing against Stanton. It's just so hard to decide who was effective and who wasn't, because it's just such a different thing than what we had seen all off season and what they're used to. Carlson had a drop. That was that's a problem. Obviously, the miscommunication, like you said, with Floyd I know it wasn't at the goal line, but
it was right there in the red zone.
Yeah,
but yeah,
the throw towards the goal line.
got there before he was ready. And you didn't with Palmer, you haven't seen that with him and Floyd. Those two had been really in sync. And so it was Stanton put the ball where it should have been, but Floyd wasn't quite ready for it.
Yeah, and then you talked about the running backs, the drop by Ellington. I didn't understand the play to Hughes. That's 2 games in a row where Arians has made a call in the red zone where I'm just kind of scratching my head based on who the target is. You had the John Brown fade route in game 1, and then this game you have the angle route and I'm pretty sure it was an angle route to Robert Hughes out of the backfield. It's like, you have Ellington, but you also have Taylor, who's a very good receiver out of the backfield. And you choose to throw it to Robert Hughes. I know, they've touted how soft his hands are and blah, 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 but it was just an odd choice of play call at that time, and something that just one of those things that you keep note of for later in the season.
And I'll have you know, guys, Pittsburgh Steelers fans have said the same thing about Arians. They say, what? He did that when he was in Pittsburgh. He's touted as this great play caller, but then you're like, what? Those 2-point conversion plays, some of the decisions that he makes in the red zone rather than going to, hey, you've got a Michael Floyd, hey, you've got a Larry Fitzgerald, hey, you've got an Andre Ellington, and you're throwing it to Robert Hughes? Okay. But he had that reputation when he was Pittsburgh too. Steelers fans will be the first to tell you they were kind of glad when he was gone. Not so glad when it turned out to be Todd Haley after the fact, but
yeah.
but they weren't thrilled with Arians.
But then and then it's the same thing with the offensive line. I will say this: I thought the offensive line played better in the run game. I tweeted it out today, just kind of watching everything again, and going over my notes. I think you look at what Bobby Massey's done the first 2 games, and this isn't a shot. People get so offended because Tyrann Mathieu hurt, so you can't judge him. Well, you know what? I can't judge what's not on the field, and that's not a shot at Tyrann Mathieu. But if you're evaluating somebody on the play of 2014. Bobby Massey's been the best draft pick from the last 3 drafts. He's really, really impressed me. I know he had the really big brain fart in game 1 where he gave up the strip sack, but you know what? That's going to happen because he does have athletic limitations laterally, but in terms of in the run game and what he's doing in pass protection outside of that one little blip, I think you have to be really excited with how he's played. Valdir was fantastic in this game. I think you kind of just look at what he did in pass protection. He really set the edge well. He gave Jason Pierre-Paul as much room to run upfield as he wanted, and he then kind of just sent him upfield the rest of the way. Those runs to the left on those zone stretch plays, and I think we had 2 power kind of outside powers to the left as well. Where you saw Valdir and Larson and Sindeline really just kind of create that wall for Ellington to run behind. So I think in the run game you were impressed. Obviously Valdir was impressive. Larson, we know about the bad whiff. Outside of that, it's hard to tell. Like I said, I gave those 3 of the 4 sacks to Stanton, but it could have actually been the offensive line. It's hard to tell. Again, in game 1, I think we'll know more next week whether or not Palmer's back. We'll start to get a feel for what Stanton is and does and what he can be. So I think that's where you'll start to see. You'll be able to identify a little bit better how well everybody on offense played.
Question, and this is because I simply didn't know. Did you see the 2 snaps that Jonathan Cooper got in the game? Because Larson was, according to the stat sheet, Larson was out for 2 snaps and Cooper was in for 2 snaps. I
I
didn't ever see it.
I never saw it either. So
Oh.
yeah, when you tweeted that out, I went back and looked at my notes, and I have the game, so I'll watch it again. But I did not see it at all, and so I'm interested to see what two plays these were.
And I'm wondering if they were nullified. Let me just pull it up and see what they have for on Pro Football Focus. And it doesn't say that he got any snaps in game 2. They don't have any snaps for him, any plays for him noted. So
Yeah, and they're usually pretty good on their snap counts. So
but I mean,
I'm
the official one says Cooper was in for 2 and Larson was out for 2. So I'm assuming, since the two don't look alike, that it's right. But yeah, it was one of kind of the cases. Defensively, the takeaways that you have is obviously the couple of things. One, the run defense was as a whole was very good. There were a couple of drives where they weren't able to completely stuff them, and as a result, third down plays were kind of trouble for a couple of drives. But I mean, you look at they gave up less than 3 yards a carry. Overall that was good. They still, pass rush still concern. You got, and then you have to look at the secondary. On both sides, there were lots of flags, but most of the time, I would agree with Bruce Arians that the refs called a good game, that they were calling actual infractions, and it was just a case of defenders trying to be too physical. Another takeaway, Antonio Cromartie is quietly having a very good season after 2 games. You get Peterson's been picked on a little bit. Obviously, he got flagged 3 times, most notable, and then probably should have been ejected when he was pleading his case and he bumped the referee. You could see in the referee's face he was real close to tossing him, but obviously I think he could tell that it was inadvertent. But yeah, so Peterson he lost some composure. But overall, it wasn't a bad defensive performance, but you kind of saw, like you saw a season ago, Peyton Manning had aside from, he had the early interception off the tip, and then he had the other interception late in the game, but you look at it, and he really sort of, sliced and diced up the middle of the field. And kind of what we talked about was, that's going to be the Cardinals' bugaboo, is just, right in the middle of the field, not too far down the field where you get, 7-8 yards out. And Manning took advantage of that. And then they had a few good big plays where they missed tackles and things like that. But we're kind of seeing what we thought we might see. But the defense overall was doing well enough because they stopped the run, and so all it takes is an incompletion or two, and they've got themselves out of the drive. But they are vulnerable. But they were still good.
Yeah, and you look at it, Dan Williams is great against the run. He hasn't even played 40 snaps yet. That's baffling to me. But that's just obviously the Cardinals are running, gearing it more towards getting after the passer than stopping the run. In terms of the secondary play, Powers and Peterson have got to figure something out. Keenan Allen's a very good wide receiver, so I don't want to take anything away from Keenan Allen when I make this statement, but it's not like they've gone against anybody, any of those feared wide receivers in the NFL. You still have Demaryius Thomas coming up. You have
Michael Crabtree and Anquan Bolden.
Yeah, you have a lot of good players coming up, and those guys have struggled so much already. You want to see something more from them, especially going forward. Everybody's talking about Peterson and, he needs to live up to the contract. I don't even care about the contract. I just want him to play well. Just play well. 2 touchdowns through 2 games. that's just not conducive to a winning formula. And through 2 games, luckily, it has not hurt the team in terms of win losses. So you can't be too hard on him. But um, you want to see that. You nailed it on Cromartie. He's playing extremely well. I think you're pleasantly surprised with how well the safeties are playing, but you're also cautiously optimistic because it hasn't been pretty in coverage.
No, that's exactly it. It's not been pretty, but it's been good enough. I mean, it they haven't been killed, but it's not like they have not shut anybody down in the passing game at all. And a lot of that goes to the fact they're not getting pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, and that's what it kind of comes down to is you built this secondary that's very well built, has a lot of weapons in it, but nobody can cover for as long as they're being asked to cover, and that's what it kind of boils down to. So through 2 games, you've gotten away with it, but you want to see something more, because as you go on in the season, you're bound to have a game where you give up, you know, bigger plays on the ground. It's just going to happen. It's the way the league works. 1 game it'll happen, but um, they're so good against the run that you're just waiting kind of for the other shoe to drop in terms of pass defense and starting to make better plays in that case. But you know what? They're doing a good job. They're keeping games. They're keeping teams out of the end zone, and they're doing a good job of making sure that the other team is not able to kind of hold time of possession, which is so important for the Cardinals at this point, um, especially without Carson Palmer. So that's what you kind of want to see going forward.
Let's look at some of an interesting note, and something I noticed when looking at snap counts. I'm looking at a couple of the formations. I didn't get their posts written up yet, but I've got all the formations charted. And well, one, we saw Tyrann Mathieu get 5 snaps. Actually, personally, I only caught 4 of them as I was charting it using the broadcast feed. Uh, and what was weird is Mathieu came in. He didn't really sub for anyone you think. He didn't come in as a safety instead of Johnson. He didn't come in as a slot guy for Powers. He was, and each of the times that he was out there was a 7th defensive back. I've never seen that from the Cardinals, where they ran a 2-2 up front, and then they had Mathieu playing near the line of scrimmage, but not completely. Kind of like another type of linebacker, but with 7 defensive backs. They didn't even bring him in instead of Buchanan. So they had Buchanan, they had Powers, they had Rashad Johnson, and they had Tyrann Mathieu in the field. I thought kind of was interested in that. At the same time that he got so few plays, you really are kind of seeing, because all the times, he's going to play, he's going to be an impact. Cardinals, I'm kind of impressed. They're taking it really slow with him, and I think that's smart.
Yeah, and you look at it and you kind of hope that trend continues in week 3. I think there's going to be this. I don't know what the word is, but I think if things are close and they need a big play, they're going to feel like they need to get him involved because he is such a difference maker. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think you kind of do the same type of thing, get him in as an extra man in coverage, and just kind of slowly feed him in. I know he wants to play more. I know he's hungry and he's chomping at the bit, but you're going up against a very physical team in San Francisco where they're going to run a lot of misdirections. He's going to have to put a lot of. It's sounds dumb to say, but I feel like he's going to have to put even more stress on the knee in a game against San Francisco or Seattle than he maybe would against a game like Washington or Oakland coming up in weeks 6 and 7. And I know that's not what Cardinals fans want to hear. I know they want to see him back out there, but get him up to 10, maybe 15 snaps in San Francisco. Maybe you go 25 in Denver, and then maybe he's ready to play 75, 80% of the snaps against the Redskins. And Oakland before you get that high octane Chip Kelly offense where I think that's kind of your target date of where he's quote unquote 100%, is that Philly game where that's the game where you're going to need a lot of Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting is the fact that my question for a while has been, how are they going to use him upon his return? They didn't use him at all like I thought. I think they didn't put him in at safety to replace Johnson for a few snaps. They didn't put him in for power. They had him as just another defensive back somewhere in the field. And I'm interested in how that's going to be forward, because if you look at the snap counts too, Rashad Johnson never left the field. And in fact, on their 2 goal line plays, when they went with the 9-man front, the 2 safeties they kept in the game were Dayon Buchanan and Rashad Johnson. And then so essentially it was Johnson who was the only defensive back, because Buchanan hasn't been a safety yet this season. So they basically had 10 in the box and Rashad Johnson, rather than they didn't go with Cromartie, they didn't go with Peterson, they didn't go with Tony Jefferson, but they kept Rashad Johnson out there. And I'm wondering if it's kind of at the same time, if Rashad Johnson is kind of keeping his job with his play.
He's been good. I mean, I don't even know if good was the word I would use. He's been there. He's missed some tackles. Obviously, he missed a big tackle in this last game. His coverage is just so... I feel like he's around the ball, but he doesn't make plays on the ball. Like, he's always in the right spot, but he's not necessarily making plays.
Right.
Yeah,
which is interesting, because that's what he was expected to be coming out of Alabama. But he turned out to be a very heady player, guy you can win with out in the field, who just isn't going to be flashy at all.
Well, and you look at how they're using Buchanan so far, and I wanted to ask you about this, your thoughts on this tonight. You look at it, he's got 76 snaps, so he's played about 50% of the snaps, 15 only against the run. He's rushed the passer 16 times. So they've blitzed him 16 times. He hasn't gotten through once yet. Are they trying too hard to make him kind of that Darryl Washington linebacker replacement right now, instead of just letting him play his game? I don't know.
I think it's kind of a mix of two things. They see him becoming like an Adrian Wilson. They're doing what they did with Adrian Wilson, and at the same time, they're trying to put them in that Darryl Washington sort of mold, because they need that speed, because they need that ability to go sideline to sideline, and they need him to get to the quarter. It's just he's not good at it yet. He's not getting pressure. He's not getting past guys. He gets on his route to the quarterback. He easily gets taken off of his blitz. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. They have him in pass coverage, but they don't have him against the run, which you figure he'd be good at, considering the type of physical in-the-box player he is. But again, you've got Kevin Minter, and he's got a bigger frame, so he's going to be better suited for it if he's going to be playing in the box.
Well, and with Buchanan, he has played well against the run when he has the opportunity. Like I said, it's only been 15 snaps, but the one detriment to him is he plays so fast that he ends up overrunning a lot of things or missing plays because of it. But he's played really well. I mean, I think the Minter Buchanan combination that is supposed to be, Darrell Washington, so to speak, in terms of what they're expected to do. I think they've done the job pretty well. I mean, I don't think they have the impact in terms of the passing game right now, especially getting to the quarterback. But I think both of them have played the run well, and Buchanan, I've been really impressed with in coverage so far. They're using him a lot in zone coverage, which is something you and I talked about prior to the season, that I thought was his best attribute. Playing in zone as opposed to expecting him to man up a lot of guys. So, he's giving up receptions, but he's not giving up a ton of yards. He's doing a good job keeping guys in front of him. And that's really, for a rookie, all you can ask at this point.
That's true. Let's Ted Ginn, kind of been the target of criticism, and then became a hero with that punt return for a touchdown. So he's been terrible. I mean, I can't tell how much has been his decision making for bringing them out of the end zone. I think I've tweeted almost every single game, oh look, it's Javier Arenas again, and because that's kind of what it's been. It's almost the point. Well, why do you have a kickoff returner? Why don't you just let anyone be back there and kneel it down and take it at the 20 instead of getting tackled at the 5 or the 10 or the 12. But then he busts out on the punt return. You went, oh, that's why they signed him, because once he shed that one tackler, dude is fast. The guy could run. He just outran everyone, and I don't know if we can expect to see that sort of impact on another touchdown this year, but at least in the punt return game, he's been better than Peterson, definitely better than Peterson was a season ago. But the kickoff return thing is really frustrating. And so at least for a game, that $3.25 million that he's getting paid this year was well worth it because it got us a win.
Yeah, and I think that's what it ends up being about, is does he earn his keep at this point? And so far, through 2 games, you'd give him like an F as a kick returner. And it's not even his kick returns. Like you said, it's his decision making. The decisions he's made so far just seem so dumb and like duh, why are you running that out? Like why are you taking the ball in the corner 8 yards deep and trying to run it out? Why not just eat it and take it at the 20? I understand he's a game breaker and he knows that he can make that play, and all he needs is that one crease and he can, and like you said, he's gone, but just eat it and live to start at the 20 instead of the 8. But, we as fans are fickle in our criticism as well, because we'll be happy to cheer for him as soon as he breaks another law.
Oh man, it's like, yeah. It went from he can, and he's the best returner we've ever seen in the amount of 2 seconds flat.
And that's what he'll do. And, he hasn't done anything as a receiver yet. He had, I think, 1 catch on the season so far, if I'm remembering correctly. I put my notes down. Nope. Sorry, he's got 2 catches on the season so far. But, I mean, that's what you expected. That's what you that's what he is. So you're paying him the $3.25 million in hopes that you get 2 of those this year, maybe 3. Let's just call it $1 million per touchdown. That's what we expect. So for every $1 million he's getting paid, we're expecting a return touchdown, and I think then you can call it a wash or call it.
Yeah, that would be quite the thing. Now let's move on to as we finish off the last topic of the show. Let's talk San Francisco game. You hate to, in week 3, put too much weight on one game, but you almost have to. The Cardinals have struggled over the last several years in the division, and it ended up being the difference in a playoff game and going home. It was their divisional record a season ago. This is a home game. against a team that is reeling after the loss they just suffered. But at the same, and they've had suffered losses on their defense, so there are definitely questions about them. I can't stress enough how much they really need this game. I will say it again. The Cardinals have to, if they have any hopes of the playoffs, have to at least break even in the division, which means essentially at least holding court. And I don't think there's any chance they win the division without going 4-2 in the division, which means they have to go win somewhere on the road as well, which makes this game scary if we're looking at Drew Stanton as the quarterback.
Right, and I think right now that's what you kind of look at is this is the first test in terms of legitimacy, I guess you want to call it, of who the Cardinals are as a team and moving forward. You said it. Obviously, it's not the be all end all. It's probably not going to come down to whether or not they make the playoffs if they lose this game or win this game. But you know what? You kind of want to see them take it as that it would. You kind of want to see them take this as, you know what? We haven't beat this team in a long time. When was the last time? I know we had this
It was a
conversation.
fluky 2011 win when John Skelton was quarterback.
Right, and that's the last win in the last 9 games or something.
Yes,
like
yes.
that, right?
They've won once out of the last 10 games, and if I recall, that game also included like 3 missed David Akers field goals, I believe.
Yeah, so you look at it, and it's just it's more than the division or playoffs or anything like that. You want to see that this team can compete. Not even compete, that this team can win and beat the 49ers because they have been owned by the 49ers thus far. And that is what comes up in terms of, at the end of the day, whether or not they're a playoff team. And if they can't do it at home, riding high, coming, on a 2-game winning streak, they're first in the division. They'll keep first in the division with the win. They're definitely going to extend their lead over the 49ers if they win. And the Seahawks get the Broncos, so it's not like the Seahawks have an easy game this week. You could theoretically see the Cardinals with a win on Sunday coming out on Monday, Monday the 22nd, you could see the Cardinals being 2 games clear in the NFC West after 3 games. Now, obviously, that's still a lot of games left in the season.
And we've seen the fool's gold before. We saw it in 2012 because that was most definitely fool's gold. And for me, as a fan, I see that's the thing I'm most worried about because these wins have not been flawless wins by any means. They have been very quirky wins, and we saw what quirky wins led to. Now, granted, it was with a terrible offensive line, but 2012 we saw quirky wins to start the season, and then it became a dumpster fire.
Right, and I don't think that this team is like that, but you never know, I guess. It's just that the NFL is so...
Well, especially if it ends up being Drew Stanton for any period, it could become a dumpster fire.
Right, and that's what's worrisome is that you have a team that's kind of winning games in weird ways through 2 games, and it can really go south in a hurry if they don't figure out this quarterback thing in terms of is Palmer healthy? Okay, Palmer's not healthy. Okay, what's our next option? And you don't want to pile too much on Stanton right now because he, as we talked about at the beginning, he did exactly what you needed him to do. but you, especially in a game like this coming up, you need more, and that's what I don't think it's unfair to want more or expect more either.
So there you have it, Arizona Cardinals fans. We've talked about John Abraham. We've talked about the Carson Palmer injury. We talked a little bit about the roster moves that have happened. We've got a huge game coming up this weekend. Arizona Cardinals host the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco 49ers team that is not at full strength on defense, as the Arizona Cardinals aren't as well. So this is a big game. We've talked about how the Cardinals win over New York, and we previewed a little bit what we can expect or how big this game is with the 49ers. I will be recording with somebody. I haven't nailed down exactly who that will be from Niners Nation yet, but in the next couple of days I will record that with one of the bloggers over at Niners Nation, our SB Nation sister site for the San Francisco 49ers, and I will have that interview and preview up later this week. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. Thanks for listening.
Have a good night.
And that'll do it, sir.
All right. Thanks, man.